Developed by Quantic Dream and directed by the Sun King David Cage, 2013's Beyond Two Souls is not a good game. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that it's a bad game. I want to get this out of the way up front because throughout this video I'm going to be saying a lot of very kind things about the game, and I don't want you to misinterpret my enthusiasm as an endorsement of either the game or its creator. Beyond Two Souls follows Jodie, portrayed in-game by actor Elliot Page, from birth and childhood through to adulthood, allowing the player to take control at key points throughout the narrative. Unlike many games nowadays which emphasize player choice and freedom of expression, Beyond Two Souls is a very rigidly structured work. That is to say, the role of the player as an active agent is secondary to the thematic and narrative intentions of its creator. Whether or not this restricting of player freedoms works to further the themes of the game is up for debate, but I will say in my own experiences with the game, the sequences in which you control an adolescent or pre-adolescent Jodie are the ones in which this mode of play feels the most deliberate. Which brings me to the topic of today's video. One great scene and an otherwise awful game. In the game's fourth chapter, a young Jodie is made to attend the birthday party of Kirsten, an older girl with whom she shares only a passing acquaintance. There she is introduced to Kirsten's group of friends, including sex pest Matt, and it becomes clear very quickly just how out of her depth Jodie is in this scenario. After sharing a beer with the group, Jodie is approached by Matt, who begins flirting with her, subtly at first and then not so subtly. Learning that she is being studied by the Department of Paranormal Activity, the group demand Jodie show them a display of her powers, prompting Jodie and her psychic companion Aiden to lash out, stunning the group into silence. Later, while unwrapping gifts, Kirsten becomes enraged when she learns that Jodie has brought her an antique book of poetry, prompting the group to begin verbally and later physically assaulting her. Escaping from the cupboard under the stairs, Jodie is given the option to either walk away or seek revenge. In the first instance, Jodie will simply leave the party unnoticed. However, if the player instead chooses vengeance, Aiden will use his powers to antagonize the teams, beating them into unconsciousness and eventually setting the house ablaze. Jodie's surrogate father Nathan returns her to the DPA facility. Also worth noting here, it is heavily implied throughout the scene that it was Kirsten's mother who invited Jodie to the party, and doesn't this all just make your skin crawl? Throughout the party, it is the player's job to help Jodie navigate the social minefield, acting almost as her conscience. Should Jodie accept the beer when it is offered to her, or should she refuse? Should she be honest with these people about her powers, or keep them hidden? Should she lean in, or should she pull away when the older boy attempts to kiss her? Before giving control to the player, the game takes a moment to set the mood. In a conversation with Nathan, played by Willem Dafoe, Jodie expresses discomfort with her having to attend the party, fearing that she will be disliked, made to feel like an outsider.
You've been begging me for weeks. You're not going to back up now.
I don't know anybody there. They might all hate me, and stress is awful. Let's just go.
Just take a deep breath. There's no reason to panic. You know how much I sacrificed?
This moment in the car with Nathan, a conversation between a father and his daughter which is no more than a minute long, serves as the narrative anchor around which the rest of the scene operates. Jodie is desperate to fit in. She has waited for an opportunity like this her whole life, but now that it's here, it's terrifying. With this context, suddenly all of her choices throughout the scene make sense. Her lack of any other options makes sense. She's overwhelmed, trapped in an unfamiliar setting with people who she doesn't know and is unsure of how to act. It's narrative informing play. Compare and contrast with this scene from earlier in the game in which you control an adult Jodie, now employed as a governmental operative, as she attempts to steal documents whilst undercover at a party in a foreign embassy. Unlike the party, where the player's actions are informed by a short narrative sequence played out before being given control, the embassy unceremoniously dumps the player into the middle of the action. Jodie arrives with her partner Ryan, immediately excuses herself to use the restroom, and then just... Despite playing as an adult, a highly skilled, trained for years in the CIA adult, the player actually has less understanding of the world around them than they did as a kid. The sequence that requires the most explanation to get the player bought in is, for some reason, the sequence that received the least. It's infuriating. Both scenes are ultimately unimportant to the overall narrative of the game too. You're never going to see any of these characters again, you're never going to face consequences for the actions you take here. So why then does the birthday party feel so much more? Why is it that 8 years later, I still remember how I felt the first time I played through the sequence, whereas I'm having to rewatch Let's Plays of the game to remember how the sequence in the embassy plays out? One of my goals with this series is to get people thinking critically about the media that they consume, to ask questions about why certain scenes work when others do not, why certain technical choices were made, and how they furthered the narrative. Beyond Two Souls is not a good game, but in its best moments, I believe it can serve as a sort of beginner's guide to critical thinking about art. The limited controls and the emphasis placed on both narrative and performance mean that it's very hard for players to miss the point of the game. Similar to Pathologic or Disco Elysium, two extraordinary games which I'd highly recommend you play, Beyond Two Souls is a game that wears its heart on its sleeve, and in these two scenes, I think that we gain the clearest insight into the creator's intentions.